Welcome to the Explainer. Listen, today we're talking about breaking the rules. If you've ever dreamed of building something truly incredible, you might assume you have to follow this strict, traditional path, right? Do exactly what they teach you in business school. Well, what if I told you that some of the most insanely successful entrepreneurs out there completely ignore those rules? Today, we are diving into a completely different way of thinking. To show you exactly what I mean, let me tell you a quick story about a graphic design teacher named Linda Weinman. So back in 1995, she was just looking for a simple digital sandbox, literally just an online space where her students could play around with these brand new tools, things like Photoshop and Illustrator, and have a place to show off their work. So she just built a website. Over time, that little sandbox grew, and she eventually moved all of her teaching online. Fast forward a few years, and she sells that exact same website to LinkedIn. They renamed it LinkedIn Learning, and get this, it sold for a staggering $1.5 billion. Linda is just the absolute perfect example of someone who operates with a totally counter-conventional mindset. Because here's the thing, true entrepreneurs operate completely differently than big corporations. Today we're going to rapid fire through 6 specific mindsets: saying yes, solving problems first, thinking narrow, asking for cash up front, borrowing what you need, and finally, acting without asking for permission. Let's dive right into tip 1. Break big business rules and simply say, yes, we can.
If you work in a massive company, you are taught to stick to your knitting. You figure out your core competencies, you know the things you're already really good at, and you absolutely never step outside of that box. If a customer asks for something slightly different, the big corporation just says, no, sorry, we don't do that. But a real entrepreneur, they look right at the unknown and say, yeah, yes, we can do that.
Take this guy, Arnold Correa, down in Brazil. He built this massive business called Atmo Digital just by totally ignoring those rigid corporate rules. He was doing basic event management when a customer asked, hey, could you broadcast our training events in real time to 260 stores across Brazil using satellite uplinks? Now, Arnold knew absolutely nothing about satellite technology, zero. But he just said, yes, we can do that. And he went out and figured it out. Later on, Walmart came to him and asked if he could put those TVs right on the sales floor to run ads for products like laundry detergent directly in the aisles. Again, he said yes. Just by saying yes to these wild customer requests outside of his comfort zone, he managed to reinvent his business 4 separate times. All right, moving on to tip 2, focus on specific problems and stop obsessing over products. Think about this for a second. When a giant company decides they want to innovate, what do they actually do? They take the little blue speckles out of the laundry detergent, turn them green, and slap new and improved on the box. Or they release, I don't know, a diet cherry vanilla version of a soda. That is pure product-first logic. But entrepreneurs use problem-first logic. They don't obsess over the product, they zero in on real, highly frustrating problems. A fantastic example of this is surgical forceps. Forceps are tools used by surgeons every day, but they used to have this massive, annoying flaw. They tended to stick to human tissue. So an entrepreneur named Jonathan Thorne noticed this. He saw that during facelifts, the tissue was sticking to the forceps, which was frustrating the plastic surgeons and dragging out the surgery time. So he went to work and developed a brand new silver-nickel alloy that wouldn't stick. But he didn't just stop there. He started looking for an even bigger problem, a place where sticking forceps were a genuine crisis, and he found neurosurgeons. I mean, if you're having brain surgery, you absolutely do not want forceps sticking to and pulling away healthy brain cells, right? He focused laser-like on this critical problem, built an incredible business around it, and eventually sold it to a major medical company called Stryker. He hit the jackpot because he chased a specific problem, not just a product. Let's look at tip 3. Think narrow, not broad. You've got to ignore the giant markets. Big businesses are obsessed with scale. They believe they need massive, giant markets just to even move the financial needle. To them, why on earth would you mess around with a tiny group of people? But for an entrepreneur, aiming small is actually the absolute smartest way to start something huge. You want to find a very, very specific group of people with a major pain point. This is literally the origin story of Nike. Phil Knight was a distance runner, and his coach was a guy named Bill Bowerman. At that time, running shoes were basically only made for sprinters. And sprinters, well, they run on nice, smooth, predictable tracks. But distance runners, they are out there running on dirt roads, stepping on sticks and rocks, they're getting sprained ankles and shin splints constantly. Knight and Bowerman decided to focus entirely on this incredibly narrow, highly specific niche of elite distance runners. They built a shoe with much better lateral stability, a wider footbed, and some extra cushioning.
By solving a very specific problem for a very small group of people, they built the foundation to eventually expand into tennis, basketball, and basically become the global powerhouse we know today.
Okay, tip 4, smart ways to fund ideas. This is all about riding the float. Big companies usually have mountains of cash lying around. But for entrepreneurs, cash is literally the lifeblood of the business, and you have to get creative to find it. When Elon Musk joined the Tesla team, they had a very specific, ambitious 3-step master plan. Step 1, build a really fancy, super expensive sports car for a select few. Step 2, take the money from that and use it to build a slightly lower-priced car. Step 3, use the profits from that second car to finally build a mass-market car that everyday people could actually afford.
It's a great plan, but how did they actually get the cash to pull it off? Simple. They asked for it up front. For their very first car, the Roadster, they found wealthy folks who cared about the environment and really wanted to be seen in the next cool thing. They sold 100 cars at $100,000 a pop, cash on the barrelhead. That put $10 million in the bank before they had even built a single car. And that exact same strategy scaled up massively. When they finally introduced the mass-market Model 3, nearly 500,000 people put down a $1,000 deposit. Just do the math on that for a second. That is $500 million in cash sitting in the bank up front, which they used to fund the engineering and the factory, all before the cars were even manufactured. It's brilliant.
Tip 5, beg, borrow, but please don't steal. We're skipping the traditional ROI. If you've taken a finance class, you know all about ROI, right? Return on investment. You calculate exactly what you need to buy, you project the cash flow for the next 10 years, and you decide if the whole thing is worth it. But rule breakers use a totally different standard. Beg, borrow, but please, please don't steal. The secret here is that you do not actually need to buy your assets if you can figure out a way to just borrow them.
Look at Tristram and Rebecca Mayhew over in the UK. They wanted to build this massive treetop adventure course business, but obviously, buying entire forests would completely ruin any standard ROI calculation. It's just too expensive. So they just asked a simple question. Well, who already has trees? Turns out the UK Forestry Commission had plenty of trees, and what they really wanted was more visitors. So the Mayhews just struck a deal. They essentially borrowed the government's trees, the parking lots, and even the bathrooms. All they had to do was show up and string their ropes and adventure kits up in the branches. By borrowing their biggest, most expensive assets, they easily built out over 30 locations without taking on any massive upfront real estate costs.
And that brings us to our final rule. Tip 6, stop asking for permission. We can call this the Uber approach.
In the corporate world, if you have a wild new idea, you generally have to run it past an entire army of lawyers and regulators first. It takes forever to get a yes, and frankly, it is incredibly easy for them to just say no to protect themselves from risk. But startups, they live in a totally different reality. When digital regulations are outdated, gray, or just completely ambiguous, true entrepreneurs don't sit around waiting for a lawyer's blessing. They just get on with it.
Think about Uber's initial launch. They decided to start a massive taxi company without actually owning a single taxi. Now, if they had gone to city regulators beforehand, knocked on the door and asked for permission to launch this completely unproven digital ride-sharing app, those regulators almost certainly would have said no way, mostly just to protect the existing legacy taxi industry. So Uber simply didn't ask. They just launched the app. Now, regardless of how you view their later tactics, their initial launch is a perfect illustration of this entrepreneurial principle. Act first, rather than seeking permission, especially when the old rules just haven't caught up to the new technology yet.
Start your own journey. We've covered a lot today. Saying yes to the impossible, obsessing over specific problems, keeping your focus narrow, getting that cash up front, borrowing your biggest assets, and taking action without waiting for permission.
Which leaves us with this final thought for you. Think about a project, a challenge, or a business idea that you are working on right now. Is there a roadblock you're facing today where applying just one of these 6 mindsets could help you break right through it? Maybe, just maybe, it is time to stop playing by the old corporate rules and start breaking them. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.